There are certain books that make me feel nostalgic and make me feel like a little girl again. And Rain Village did that for me. So I want to thank you in person now that we finally, after a number of years now, have been able to meet. So what have you been doing since 2007?
Well, that was my first book, Rain Village, and then in 2009, my second book came out, and that was called Godmother, The Secret Cinderella Story, and that was a retelling of the Cinderella story, and it was from the perspective of the fairy godmother. And she's this old woman living in New York City with this with these white wings that she has to conceal, and she's always remembering her past back when she was a fairy, and she was supposed to send Cinderella to the ball but didn't. So that was my first fairy tale retelling. And last year my third novel came out, Mermaid, and that's a retelling of the original Little Mermaid story by Hans Christian Andersen, but from the perspective of the mermaid and the princess, who in the original ends up with the prince. And so these two rivals and the relationship that develops between them. And then just last month, my first middle grade novel came out, called The Next Full Moon. That's about a 12-year-old girl who lives in Pennsylvania, and everything's going well, but she's pretty shy and a typical 12-year-old girl, and then she starts growing feathers, and it's incredibly embarrassing, totally mortifying, and I was just remembering what it was like for me to be 12, and that's how I felt all the time. And that's also based on old fairy tales about the Swan Maiden.
You have a thing about feathers that I love so much. Tell me about that.
I do really like, in Rain Village, there were feathers. Rain Village is about a girl who becomes a trapeze star, and she's wearing these white feathered wings, I think.
Talk about Ava. She is the person in the story. She's the 12-year-old. She's the one.
Really, I just remembered what it was like to be 12. Like, I didn't know how challenging it would be to go, because my other books, they're all adult books. They kind of cross over to teens a little bit, but this is the first time I was going into an entirely different age group. But really, I just imagined being 12, and I remembered it so vividly. I was really surprised at how vividly I remembered that, and just the experience of being, embarrassed and mortified and uncomfortable in this changing body and self-conscious. And really, I just kind of occupied those memories and wrote from that. And I really liked, the thing I love about the fairy tales is I love the combination of gritty reality and pain and those kinds of emotions mixed in with the magic and beauty and glitter of the fairy tales. Like, I love that combination. And with the 12-year-old, with Ava, I really loved how that mortification of being 12 kind of mixes in with the beauty and magic. Because to me, that age is about that, this time that this magical, powerful stuff is happening to your body, but it just feels so confusing and strange. And so I liked the mix of all that for this one.
Right. I mean, she's growing wings, and at that age, young girls go through, puberty. So when I read sections of the story, I likened it to, a young girl growing through these feathers that are very symbolic. Did you feel that way when you were writing the story? That feathers are actually a symbol?
Yeah. I mean, because when I was, I kind of developed early, and at age 12 I was very tall, and I really looked a lot older than my fellow students, and I was, I developed early, and so I just felt very self-conscious, and there was nothing I could, it was hard to understand, and it was really the same, this girl growing these white feathers all down her arms and back. It was really the exact same feelings, just exaggerated a little bit, but really the feelings were the same. I mean, I was as mortified as if I had been growing feathers. In the Swan, basically, Ava's father had fallen in love with this Swan Maiden, had taken her robe and had married her, and they had children, and then eventually in all these stories, the magical woman ends up leaving somehow, finding her magical garment and leaving. So basically, this is a man who's been raising this child alone. So always in these stories, there are some children left behind, but I don't think that people normally tell the stories of those children. So I'm telling the story of this girl who's been raised alone by this man. And so I wanted that relationship to be kind of, complicated and lovely, but at the same time, he can't maybe deal with the issue she's having at that moment the way that maybe her mother could if her mother were there. I don't know, I just remember those magical nights when you're a kid and going outside and seeing the fireflies all lit up and the moon overhead and the stories that adults will tell you about what's happening in the sky and in the moon and in the constellations. Like that kind of magic, I thought, kind of could be wrapped up in the lore of the Swan Maidens, who in my book only can come out during a full moon, or they can only change during a full moon and all this kind of.
Whenever I get an opportunity to dream and imagine, I'm grateful for it. So I want to thank you for coming onto Boland's blog and revisiting me after all these years.
Yes.
Very loyal.
Thank you so much for having me.